Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and why you chose to engage with the peace process or not.
Johnny Andrews. I've been involved in local politics here for some 25 years since the Good Friday Agreement. I joined the Ulster Unionist Party and supported David Trimble in all he was doing through some of those knife edge votes, and worked myself up to be party officer in the Ulster Unionist Party, and was instrumental in the project with the Conservatives to bring real politics to Northern Ireland under the David Cameron MP joint project in 2010. I then later moved on to the Conservative Party in Northern Ireland and have been a member of that ever since, having fought in one general election campaign and two local election campaigns.
Now, a lot of people will say that the Good Friday Agreement or the Belfast Agreement marked a significant turning point in Ireland's history. In your view, what has been the most profound impact of the agreement on Irish society in the past 2 decades?
Um, there's no doubt it's moved things on considerably. And, we've got to welcome the peace process. This has changed things dramatically. But I like to see it as a 50-year project. The beginnings of the Good Friday Agreement commenced in the 1970s. The work that went into it, a lot of people think that a peace process is something that can happen instantly. But the work that commenced in the 1970s was essential to bring us to what happened in 1998. I was a great supporter of the Good Friday Agreement, and it really helped to bring the two communities together. And I think we're living the benefits of that still. And I think it's really important to remember that it was the 1970s where the process started, with the fair employment laws that were brought in as a result, possibly pressure from the US. There was a lot of US business being obtained in Northern Ireland, exports to the US, and there was various principles, the McBride principles, that brought in fair employment rules here, which really moved Northern Ireland into a much better place as preparation for a possible settlement. So there was a 25-year lead-in. We've now had 25 years since the Good Friday Agreement, and I think that is now an opportunity for us to reassess the whole thing. And while I welcome what has been done, there are lots of flaws and there have been lots of failings that really need addressed now. We've allowed it to bed in. It's bedded in well. We've got a much better, more peaceful society here. But there are a couple of serious problems that need addressed, and this is the time to do it. So if you take the long view on the 50-year view, and we must remember to thank the people that set up that peace process. They were patient. Even various Conservatives that went back to initiating the original power sharing agreement of Sunningdale. Ted Heath, great people in Conservative cabinet in the 70s, Francis Pym, William Whitelaw, and of course Brian Faulkner from here. These people ought to be given a lot of credit for what happened 25 years later. There was a 25-year lead-in. And I think there are lessons to be learned in the Middle East and things. A lot of people think they can go into the Middle East and do quick fixes, but quite often you have to realize that it took 25 years for us to get to a peace process. A lot of hard work, just chipping away at making it a fairer society here that gave the conditions for the peace process.
Now, I'm going to shift your focus a little bit to the resistances of peace building process here. And my question will be two-part. The first part is, what do you think are the resistance or challenges to peace building that we have already overcame?
Well, the biggest challenges at the time of 98 was getting the two sides to come together, give up violence. And, the choreography of that was really, really tricky. And it was about pushing one side a little bit, then the other, and nudging each one forward. And removing vetoes. It was really important to remove vetoes and make sure that people actually got round the table. But the challenges after the agreement,
Right.
I think, have been neglected
And
considerably.
And what do you think are those challenges?
Well, in summary, I think there are two failings as a result of the failure to follow through on some of the principles of the Good Friday Agreement. And the two main failings have been the failure of the two governments as guarantors to implement some of the key principles of the Good Friday Agreement. And I voted for it. Most people at the time, they saw it as a bringing together of the two communities. And I think people were, really excited by the idea of a shared society, a shared future. There's been considerable failings in that. In fact, that has been reversed. And it was obviously, I pay tribute to Tony Blair, who was instrumental in negotiating the Good Friday Agreement, without whom it probably would never have been possible. But the follow-up agreement, we were promised a review of the agreement to look at the failings. We've never had that. Instead of that, there was a so-called review at St Andrews in 2007, which actually took the agreement backwards and entrenched what's now become a carve-up. And we now have a paralysis in government due to the carve-up that was created by that second amendment to the settlement, which was the St Andrews Agreement, which I must emphasize was never agreed by the parties. It was imposed by the government. The parties decided they didn't want to resist it and went along with it, but none of the parties actually approved it. So we're sitting with an agreement that's never been approved. So the Good Friday Agreement was substantially amended without referendum, and sadly, that carve-up has been perpetuated, and that's led to a system of paralysis and bad government that we've got now. So, in my view, that was a big failing of the two guarantors, the Irish and UK governments, in not following up on those basic principles of a shared society, shared future, which is still holding us back in many ways. And it's holding back good government, it's holding back the improvement in public services, which are being neglected. And I think it's time that we reviewed properly the Good Friday Agreement, arrangements for government in Northern Ireland to take away the mandatory element. And, we were promised at the time that the mandatory element would be removed, and there'd been a maturing of politics to allow real politics to take place with proper coalition governments and parties teaming up and actually having proper programs for government. Instead of that, we have this constant just reshuffling of the deck chairs, and the same parties are continually in government. And as a result, people are turned off. Turnouts are going down. There's a threat to democracy here for two reasons. One, we can't throw the government out under the mandatory system. The parties just get back in. And secondly, the turnout is falling because people are getting less interested because they see that the government is not delivering. So, while the Good Friday Agreement produced huge progress in terms of social progress, in terms of social justice, in terms of peace, in terms of managing the economy, the public services, and the welfare and lifestyle and well-being of people, it's deteriorated. Society's even more divided than it was. We now have 96 peace walls, whereas in 1998 we only had 48 peace walls. So the number of peace walls and divisions in Belfast and elsewhere have increased. And I see it as really important that the whole system of mandatory coalition is reviewed, and that the two governments step up to the plate in terms of ensuring that shared society, shared future, shared education, shared housing is delivered.
And what do you think is the vision for peace in Ireland? What are the most vital elements to peace building?
I think we've got the elements there. The Good Friday Agreement is a fantastic start. We've got the structure, the building blocks. The problem is that when you look at all the work that went in prior to the Good Friday Agreement, 25-year lead up right back to the McBride principles of the 70s, the initial power sharing experiment, the constant ensuring of equality and fair employment here, 25 years of really hard work. Then suddenly everyone thinks it's solved, 98, and there's been very little attention given to allowing the agreement to mature and develop and produce good government.